Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Ann Morse, and I'm a Program Director for the National Conference of State Legislatures, where I staff the NCSL Hunger Partnership. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Reducing Food Waste, Feeding the Hungry is Just One Benefit. This webinar is a follow-up to an unprecedented session on food waste that NCSL held at our spring forum in Denver this past May. This was the first time that hunger, human services, environment, agriculture, energy, and transportation stakeholders were brought together to discuss this issue of food waste management, which cuts across so many jurisdictional areas. Because this topic of food waste covers such a vast array of issues across several committee jurisdictions here at NCSL, today's webinar is co-hosted by NCSL's Natural Resources and Infrastructure Committee, Health and Human Services Committee, and NCSL's Hunger Partnership. As a reminder, today's webinar is the fifth in our six-part series of e-learning webinars. Recordings of our first four webinars on the 2013 Farm Bill, alternative fuel vehicles, the Restore Act, and waste-to-energy technology can all be found on the NCSL website at www.ncsl.org. Today's webinar will focus on the many different benefits to reducing food waste, from feeding the hungry to reducing greenhouse gas emissions at landfills, and to reducing agricultural waste and saving money. We are so pleased to have three great speakers today: Jerry Lynch from General Mills, Sari Eckhouse from USDA, and Senator Virginia Lyons from Vermont, to help guide us to these economic, social, and environmental benefits and discuss the various public-private partnerships that are tackling food waste. As you can see by the co-host of this webinar, this issue brings together an interesting intersection of policies and committees at NCSL. Our issue forum at Spring Forum this year in Denver was standing room only. Popularity in this topic provides us the opportunity to host this webinar and continue addressing this issue for legislators and legislative staff. Thanks to the leadership of the NCSL Hunger Partners, we are able to showcase how committed stakeholders can identify and implement policies that work. We are always learning from our public, private, and nonprofit partners in hunger relief. For more information on NCSL's Hunger Partnership and for our latest issue brief on food waste, feeding people, not landfills, please visit www.ncsl.org/hunger. We will be holding a Q&A session after all of our speakers have presented. As a reminder, you may type questions into the Q&A chat box in the right-hand side of your screen at any time during the webinar. With that, I am so pleased to introduce our first speaker, Jerry Lynch. Jerry leads the global sustainability efforts for General Mills as the company's Chief Sustainability Officer. Jerry has been working for General Mills since 1995 in various commercial and marketing roles. He volunteers his time on the advisory board of the Food Recovery Network and is the co-chair of the Food Waste Reduction Alliance, a groundbreaking alliance with two goals: to increase food sent to donation and to decrease food waste to landfills. Jerry, please take it away.
And thank you very much for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. Let me just start by saying how much we have appreciated the partnership that we have with NCSL. It benefits us greatly on this topic in understanding the challenges and where we can add value in helping to tackle this issue, and we're really looking forward to having NCSL here next summer in Minneapolis for their meeting. So thank you very much for inviting us. What I thought I would do with you today is a couple of things. First of all, to just give you a little bit about General Mills to make sure you understand who we are and why we're interested in this issue, how we think about the problem of food waste, then talk about the industry work that's going on and what an individual player like ourselves is doing in this space. So we are a food products company, as many of you know, and these are a number of our brands. We're a $19 billion company in sales around the world, and about two-thirds of that of those sales are still in the United States. We have been working on this area and these issues for quite a while, all the way back to early crop rotation, our early use of recycled paper boards, all the way up to today working on specific ingredients and environmental challenges related to those specific ingredients. And we have continued to set goals for ourselves to drive improvement. You can see a number of these goals across energy, water, greenhouse gas emissions, transportation efficiency, packaging improvements, and certainly solid waste, in which food waste fits into the challenge. And part of the work that we do is relative to feeding those who go hungry every day. We've been donating food to Feeding America for over 3 decades. We continue to be a top 10 donor to them, and this is, of course, the nation's leading domestic hunger relief charity. But we're not only donating product, over 37 million last year, but through our employee volunteers are striving to find better ways for Feeding America to distribute that food more efficiently. We've expanded a pilot program that safely extended best if used by dates on our products, and that makes sure that food goes to those who need it rather than being destroyed. This has allowed all of us to serve millions more of those in need. So this is certainly a big issue. When we look at data here in the United States, food scraps are the largest portion of food waste that is going to landfill, according to EPA. And when you then look at what that means in terms of just an environmental impact, the greenhouse gas emissions generated from landfills, from food waste, is a significant contribution. So what you see here next is a pyramid that I'm sure all of you are familiar with. It's EPA's food waste hierarchy. Similar to the food pyramid, except upside down, it serves as a guide to where we should be sending our food resources. And what we've done down the left-hand side here is to marry in the amount of food that's going to each of those items. And so this is work that was done by BSR, Business for Social Responsibility, the nonprofit think tank that the industry asked them to do to understand where the amount of food waste is going. And unfortunately, it's an upside-down pyramid. About 2/3 of it is still going to disposal rather than being diverted to better sources. This is also a global issue. I'm sure you're all familiar with the headlines from a week ago, the FAO releasing a report indicating that about 1/3 of all calories that are produced every year around the world go to waste, and that the challenges are different depending on which part of the world you're in. Those challenges in the developing world really are much more focused on the distance between the farm gate and the first point of entry into the marketplace. Those challenges in the developed world tend to be after the consumer. Although in both cases, both of those areas are challenging. So turning now to work that's going on in the industry, 2 years ago, the Food Waste Reduction Alliance was formed, and this is a cooperation between the Food Marketing Institute, the Grocery Manufacturers Association, the National Restaurant Association, and key partners like Waste Managers, Waste Management, and Feeding America. And our goals here are to reduce the food waste that's going to landfill and to increase food donation to the hungry. And what we're really looking to produce are best practices and training that organizations and companies can take advantage of, to pilot emerging solutions, and then to develop efficient policy support so that we can make sure that more of this food is going to better use. When we think about the challenge of the world food system throwing away 1/3 of all the calories that are produced every year, we think about it from an economic point of view, from a social point of view, and from an environmental point of view. Certainly with nearly 900 million people around the globe going hungry every year, it is a significant social challenge to be producing that much food and still having nearly 1 in 8 people going hungry. At the same time, it is an incredible environmental concern, not just because of what goes into landfills, but if you think about it, to be allowing a third, 33% waste in the global food system, creates incredible environmental churn every year. Every year, we're producing 1/3 too many calories than what we need, and that creates incredible environmental churn. And then finally, there's obviously an economic cost of that. If you were to design a system or to design your own budget, you would never build into it 33% waste. And so we're all paying for that economic loss. So the strategy that the Food Waste Reduction Alliance focuses on is assessing the state of the industry, opportunities that are there, and barriers that are in the way of getting more food to better uses. Then secondly, identifying and sharing best practices and emerging solutions. And finally, working with all stakeholders on potential solutions. One of the things that we've done to help us pinpoint work that could be done in the policy area is we surveyed all the member companies and asked them to help us understand what the challenges are. So this was a Food Waste Reduction Alliance survey of member companies, and more than 3/4 of the respondents were able to identify barriers. For donations, you can see that the barriers really focus on concerns around transportation constraints and liability concerns. And when we think about reusing or recycling, the concerns lie really around insufficient recycling options and, again, transportation constraints. So those are areas where, as we continue to do work, we'll focus our efforts to look at what are the best practice policy options that have been adopted around the country and outside of the United States that we could get behind and help to support. Finally, then, this is just an example of some of the best practices work that we are starting to share. And the first is for organizations to really understand what their waste is, what their food waste is, what resources are being wasted, and what are the root causes of those. Are they policy causes, are they process causes, or are they practice causes? So really understanding the nature of waste. It's typically best to do a quantitative assessment here. Secondly, then, to establish standard operating procedures relating to donation of food and diversion of food so that there's a clear process and procedure for food safety, quality, and quantity. And then to develop and strengthen relationships with donation agencies and diversion partners. And this means really moving beyond just the simple donation, but looking at where can we collaborate? Where do we have capabilities that we can partner with together? I think one of the great examples is how much the cold chain has developed within the food banking network around the United States over the last 5 years. Clearly, there's a lot more room to be done there. But the strength of that cold chain to be able to enable institutional partners to donate frozen or refrigerated food into the system, or even fresh food into the system, and allow it to be able to be distributed quickly and safely, has been able to significantly make a difference in the lives of citizens around the country. So the 2014 goals for the Food Waste Reduction Alliance are to complete and share our best practices toolkit with our various partners in the various sectors, to then share a second industry assessment on food waste for retailers and suppliers, and then to complete and share our first industry assessment on the food service and restaurant sector. I'll just close with talking a little bit then about work that we're doing within the company, just to give you an example of how a private player is looking and working at this issue. We have within General Mills a product donation action team, and this is a cross-functional team of employees that works in partnership with Feeding America to maximize product donations. They work with the local food banks to alleviate hunger, reduce product destruction, and to really raise awareness about the company's long-standing work with Feeding America. And they recently spearheaded a pilot project in which donation restrictions were lifted over a 9-month period, saving more than 2 million pounds of food from landfills. Some of those restrictions were internal restrictions. Some of those restrictions were customer restrictions, but all within the very clear bounds of making sure that any donation was safe and transported securely. So as we do this work, we've been able to make a 42% reduction in the solid waste that comes out of our production facilities since 2005. About 2/3 of the potential solid waste is food-related waste. A lot of it has to do with things like hulls off of wheat or oats that are milled. So we're currently recycling more than 90% of that food waste. Recycling, in this case, is often food going to feed animals. And so all of our food waste is either donated, recycled, or composted. But we know there's more that we can be doing, so we're working on an enhanced food donation process with Feeding America, looking at technology options where we can literally work with them and provide visibility to our inventory so that as things start to get closer to ship-by dates, we can make sure that we can provide those to Feeding America on a timely basis. And then secondly, to really enhance our internal zero-loss process within our production facilities, standardization around waste reduction. And all of this is part of a commitment that we made in the context of the USDA's Food Waste Challenge, which was announced earlier this year. So as we think about this more broadly, we think there's an opportunity as a whole for greater education on the scope of food waste and the opportunities to change. We think that industry continues to have an opportunity to engage with a wide variety of partners who can help address this issue. And we think there's probably an opportunity here for the USDA EPA Food Waste Challenge to be looked at as a model for local efforts for adaptation. So with that, I will close my remarks, and I'll turn it back to Ann, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Jerry. That was extremely informative, and I'm sure we will have questions for you. As a reminder, we're holding them to the end, but if you don't want to forget your question, pop it right now into that Q&A chat box on the right side of your screen. I'd like now to introduce our second speaker, Sarah Eckhouse from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Sarah is currently the Chief of Staff to the Administrator of the Agriculture Marketing Service at USDA. Prior to joining USDA, she worked in the White House Office of Legislative Affairs, and she graduated from Harvard with a degree in biological anthropology. With that, the floor is yours, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Ann. Thanks for having me. And so USDA and EPA, as was referenced previously, launched a food waste challenge. They actually launched it June 4th of this year. So it's a departmental-wide initiative and obviously an interagency initiative. As has also been referenced, the scope of food waste is really extreme. We've got 133 billion pounds of food from U.S. retail food stores, restaurants, and homes. And when you think about the waste in how many people that could feed, how many natural resources it takes to prepare and process and transport that food, and then the effect of greenhouse gases were really it's a significant problem. So, so to work on this or take on this issue, the USDA and EPA joined together to launch the U.S. Food Waste Challenge, which has kind of 3 goals that we're working on. It's reducing food loss and waste, recovering wholesome food for human consumption, and then recycling the discards to other uses. So it's really also about public-private partnerships. So it's not just about USDA making these commitments. It's also about working with partners like General Mills to kind of encourage everybody to have a part in improving our records on issues. So our goal right now is to have 400 producer partners by 2015 and 1,000 by 2020, and this ranges from from the retail to agriculture to schools and all kinds of operations that we're looking at. So again, the private-public partnership issue. These are some of our partners. You can see the Food Waste Reduction Alliance is a really important partner, General Mills, and so it's a really broad group. And we've even got like sports teams that are supportive and working on this. Then also, of course, we want to get these commitments from industry, but we also need to be a part of the solution at USDA. We've got such a broad reach with our conservation programs, with our feeding programs, and with our work with the industry. So these are just some of the many commitments that we've made. We asked each agency within USDA to identify specific initiatives that they could work on. So we wanted everybody from, our research folks to the school lunch people, to our food safety folks. So it's really got to be everybody. So you can see here we're going to be working with our partners through the school lunch program to identify ways to reduce plate waste. They've found even things like changing the timing of lunch so it's after recess rather than before recess. If it's before recess, then kids are going to take a few bites, throw away the rest of their plate, and go outside to play. If you have lunch after recess, they're much more likely to waste less food. So these are some of the things that we're considering or committed to really on. And in each of these is also listed in more detail on the U.S. Food Waste Challenge website. So that address all. We've also got our food safety folks on the case. We're actually developing an app to kind of make a user-friendly way of finding information on food storage, proper storage temperatures. A lot of food that, there's so many different labels on foods: best by, used by, purchased by, and a lot of that gets really confusing. So this would be hopefully a way of clarifying that for consumers. And then also education, because the message out there. So they'll also be working on Twitter, bilingual education. Then we've got work earlier in the supply chain, some food that can get wasted kind of unintentionally. Sometimes regulations or quality standards that companies have make it harder for product that is totally wholesome to actually get into the market. So we're making some efforts to connect importers, for example, with feeding programs that might be able to take product that is not eligible for sale at the retail level. And we've also, again, our food safety and inspection service will be making it easier to donate wholesome misbranded meat. And again, it's very important in all of these efforts that this is not any product that is of a lower safety quality. These are completely safe and wholesome products. It's just about it might have a label on it that means it can't be sold in retail because there's a mistake. So we're very cognizant of the need to ensure that everything that we are promoting here is safe. And then the research section is also going to be really important, identifying kind of what foods are wasted. Our most recent estimate of food waste comes from 1995. And so updating that and identifying kind of what kinds of foods are being wasted will also be really valuable. And then the other piece that's very technical, and I'm not going to try to pronounce all of these words, but research on packaging and other technologies that could help us reduce food waste. You know, USDA has huge, the Agricultural Research Service, and we partner with all of our university partners. We can really make an impact there by developing new methods of reducing food waste, or kind of these anaerobic digesters to have other options and alternatives for recycling food waste. And then it's also about kind of getting our own house in order. I don't know if any of you have been to the Department of Agriculture headquarters in D.C., but it's pretty massive, and there's a huge amount of food that gets served every day. So we need to make sure that we're doing a better job of composting our own food and making sure that our employees are aware of the need to reduce the plate waste. And then I just want to highlight kind of one success story that kind of was a result of, or a couple of success stories that are kind of came out of some basic research and has had an impact on the international scale. You see that, you know, new products being developed that have a longer shelf life that can be used in food insecure countries that lack adequate storage facilities, and then in Haiti, we've seen kind of inexpensive, small-scale processing equipment. So you've got, you know, tangible benefits, again, not just on, you know, feeding the hungry, but also conserving resources and even economic development and innovation. And so just, again, the website for the Food Waste Challenge is usda.gov/OCE/food waste. You can look on there. You can find every commitment that all of our partners are making, every commitment that USDA is making, along with the timeline for implementation. The idea is that we are willing to be held accountable and to really commit to this. So this is, again, it's a priority for the department. The secretary launched this himself, and so we're excited, and we're really grateful to have so many great partners like General Mills and have so much buy-in from across our stakeholders. So that's it for me, Anne. If I can send it back to you.
Thanks, Sarah. That was really helpful, and I think this really exhibits the great public-private partnerships we're able to engender and learn from. Now I'd like to introduce our final speaker, Senator Virginia Lyons from Vermont. In addition to being a state senator, Senator Lyons is vice chair of NCSL's Natural Resources and Infrastructure Committee. Senator Lyons presided over the Natural Resources Committee in the Vermont Senate when they passed landmark legislation that established universal recycling of solid waste and organic matter in the state. I would now like to give the floor to Senator Lyons to tell us more about the legislation which has since been signed into law in Vermont by Governor Shumlin. Senator?
Thank you, and I hope that you will be able to hear me as I speak. I am on a sometimes bad connection, and please let me know if there's a problem.
You sound good now.
I'm sorry?
You sound fine just now.
Thank you. And thank you for the introduction to the other two speakers for so articulately expressing the need for public-private partnerships and paying attention to food residual issues. Act 148 is really based, next slide, it's based on a number of other pieces of legislation and activities in our state. Now, I'll enumerate just a few of those before I do talk about 148. We've had, for many years in our state, a very robust solid waste management system that originates locally or regionally, is established by the state, and allows for public-private relationships between the haulers, collectors, and others. I'll mention more about that system as we go ahead. And the second thing is that for many years we have put a focus on farm-to-plate, farm-to-school, and we've had local farms and local schools, universities, restaurants, and others very concerned about the use of fresh foods as well as the use of food residuals and trying to conserve food or make them available to food shelves, nursing homes, and others. A third very important piece of legislation or concept that we've been working on for many years in the state is our composting. And composting we all think of as certainly as an agricultural enterprise, but as we move forward with food residual, we'll be thinking of it more and more as a large-scale business. And so we passed some legislation a couple of years ago that really defines different types of composting, and those which are regulated solely through the agricultural agency, but then others that may have environmental impact or effect. So we would limit the use of large-scale composting, especially in floodplains, but also in municipalities where odors and other things may affect. Our University of Vermont has had a Spire of Excellence on food systems, and that educational initiative has helped to educate many citizens of the state. I'll talk about some other pieces of legislation that have been in place as we go forward to the slide that talks about 148. This is a universal recycling law. It will establish by 2020 the full extent of the law and the elimination of those things that you can see from landfills. The next slide shows you that this is sweeping change to our solid waste management, and it's designed to radically decrease the materials that do go into landfills. I'm not talking about the plastics and so on, but I will be talking a little bit about food residuals. The important thing that you can see on this slide is the report to the legislature every 2 years, an evaluation of the costs and benefits for the expansion of not just the beverage deposit, but there's a total analysis of how this law will affect our haulers, our farmers, our restaurants, our schools. What type of infrastructure will these folks need? What type of infrastructure, what kind of recycle containers will homes need, residents need, in order to accomplish the goals in the law. So the evaluation is currently going on. Many of the slides and information that I have for you, and I've tried to limit it because it's a draft report that is currently being written by a consultant to the Agency of Natural Resources in our state. But as that analysis goes forward, we're learning many things, and I will try to identify some of those. The next slide just shows you what Act 148 is limiting and removing from the landfill between 2014 and 2020. You'll notice at the bottom is food scraps. One of the things that is also listed there is white and mixed paper, but there, in the analysis that we're doing, we're looking to see what type of paper might be compostable. So to combine the food scraps with compost, compostable white paper, and as you know, food scraps are high in nitrogen, and the white paper might be a carbon source to ameliorate the nitrogen in the compost. So there's some evaluation of that, and I'm sure there will be continued research on that, both at the university and at our landfills. The next slide gives a picture of the solid waste planning entities that currently exist in the state. This is kind of, you don't see the whole state there, but you do see most of the very small solid waste planning entities. Many towns, because we passed a law about 30 years ago that establishes local and regional solid waste management, you can see that each town and some of that gray area that you see is a larger regional facility responsible for waste management. The way that is done is through local government in association with private entities. One of our more robust relationships is with Casella, which is a company that is very well known for its waste management and source and waste separation programs. The next slide shows just 4 or 5 of the larger facilities that we have in the state. These facilities will become very important to us as they develop local and regional composting facilities, as they develop relationships between institutions and trying to get some of the food residuals from restaurants and linking people. The Solid Waste District, for example, in Chittenden County has taken a leadership role, not simply in composting and limiting what goes into the landfill, but they've also taken a leadership role in educating folks about how best to, who best to work with and how best to divert food waste and to keep food waste from actually happening. So the next slide shows those collection services that are required so I don't need to talk further about it, but you'll notice that the facilities and the trash haulers are each responsible for ensuring that the law is fully implemented. As we developed in the House and in the Senate, it became clear that trash haulers, some of the smaller trucks and some of the larger businesses, are not ready for accomplishing the goals of sort of the recycling goals that we have and source separation of food scraps, leaf and yard residuals, and other mandated recyclables. It's going to mean some infrastructure changes for them. They're going to need different trucks and different kinds of containers. The next slide is simply redundant with it's the timeline for when food scraps will be fully banned from the landfill. And we'll move on to the next slide and then the one after that. So you'll notice that there is Act 148 specifically lists a hierarchy, and you can move to the next slide because I think it's clearer, a hierarchy of how recycling of food scraps will take place. So the first is to reduce waste and strategies to include such things as planned shopping lists and improved storage methods, reduce production of foods, as folks have been talking about. And then the second most important thing is to donate food to rescue organizations or to food shelves and so on. And then the third is to divert food scraps for agricultural uses, such as feeding animals when appropriate, or to compost or process in anaerobic digesters, or finally to recover for energy. One set of laws that we've had in the state for quite some time, and is the farm net metering bill, which allows for agricultural sales of electricity from methane digesters onto the grid. And we also have a feed-in tariff for our methane digesters, and we also have available a Clean Energy Development Fund incentive for farms that might want to establish methane digesters. And all of these things are falling into place as Act 148 is implemented. And then the next slide is simply the individual responsibility timeline. As the tonnage, the first year, 2014, which is next year, those folks who are producing 104 tons or more of food residuals will be the first to test the system. These are larger institutions, and many of them are already very much aware of and prepared for July 1st. And then at each successive year, we move quietly down to individuals and folks who might, like us in our own homes, producing fewer and fewer food residuals. One of the parts of the law that I think is important is it's a pay-as-you-throw system. So the more you produce, more waste you produce and would put into the landfill, the more you pay. And so there's an incentive for folks to reduce the amount of waste that they actually produce. The next slide shows a breakdown of the costs associated with, some of the costs associated with this bill, with the law. And as we did doing a cost analysis, and as I said before, the report will not be complete until November. But what we're finding is, what we are finding is that we're looking at about a $7 million need in the system, and that for us is actually good news. That's not a lot of money for all the work that we will be doing, nor for perhaps improving some of the trucks and providing incentives for haulers to improve their infrastructure. Sorry. Then if you move down to 2 slides, skip the next and move to the types of establishments that are generating food residuals, might on its face seem very obvious. But what we're finding as we do the analysis is that we don't know all the places that are producing food residuals and all the extent to which we need to communicate and educate folks. So as I said before, our elementary and secondary schools and colleges and universities, our hospitals and other large institutions have been working closely together for many years to try to reduce food waste. Then if you look at the next slide, there's a prediction of what the impact will be. And I think the 2 messages that we're hearing as we do the analysis is we need more information, so we'll be probably passing legislation to increase the data collection that happens at those local and regional solid waste districts to understand what waste is coming in and where it's coming from in order to reduce it. And then secondly, the other lesson we're learning is that this will be effective, and we look for a 60% reduction of food residuals by 2020. The next slide really identifies composting is a key activity in the diversion of food waste and some of the data that is there. And again, this is preliminary data. The next slide talks about the transportation issues that we're facing. As I said before, Casella Waste has been a very strong has a strong private-public relationship with our waste management infrastructure, and they've done a great deal of work to sort, prevent food waste from accumulating. And then finally, the last slide, you will see the benefits of the law, and we do predict that all of these benefits will be realized as we move forward. We've already seen some of the benefits from the green job creation. We've had small companies developing. We've seen the food system becoming more and more robust. The state is filled with specialty organic farmers, specialty restaurants, but also very much an increase in the connectivity between community members, food producers, and others. It's just been a really remarkable sense of community that's developed as a result of the work that we've been doing over many years. I think that I can wrap up. I will say that the time is so ripe for all of this, not to use a pun, but the time is very ripe for this to happen. If you move to the next slide, you know, the picture of Vermont that you see before, we're not quite there yet this fall, but we can realize the benefit of our countryside and our food system, and we can benefit in many ways, both from energy benefit for folks gaining some health just by reconnecting the landscape. So thank you very much, and I hope you've been able to hear as I've been speaking.
Thank you, Senator Lyons. That is indeed a beautiful landscape, and thanks so much for taking the time to provide insight on your legislation. I'd like to now open things up to the audience. If anyone has questions for our three presenters, if there are any questions submitted on the Q&A chat box, I will read them out loud. Operator, can you please begin the Q&A?
Sure. The floor is now open for questions. If you do have a question, please press *1 on your telephone keypad at this time. Questions will be taken in the order they were received. If at any time your question has been answered, you may remove yourself from the queue by pressing 1. If you are using a speakerphone, we ask that while posing your question, you pick up your handset to provide favorable sound quality. Again, ladies and gentlemen, if you do have a question or comment, please press *1 on your telephone keypad at this time.
While people are formulating their questions, if I can pose one to Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Okay. We're wondering to share lessons with your colleagues who may not have spent much time on this topic before today. Is there one piece of information you wish you had on hand when you started looking at this issue of food waste management? What lessons can you share?
That's a terrific question. You know, I think that the issue of waste management has been growing in Vermont. It was the alignment of many different interests that brought this together. I think what I wish I had known. I think how important education and outreach is in this area, and how important our local hauls, the folks who actually do the work on the ground, collect the garbage, the recyclables, how important those folks are to pull into the conversation as early as possible. They can make a huge difference in all of this. And then finally, I think I would have liked to have known how important it is to engage our larger institutions and businesses in their recycling of food residuals. So, the businesses that have cafeterias, the hospital setting, and to really work with them because, again, you have in a hospital a healthcare setting where the concern is both about healthy food but also about not wasting. And so just knowing those things and knowing that you can bring those partners together, I think, is very key.
Thank you. That was great. Jerry, this seems to beg your insight as well on how vital partnerships are across public and private sectors. And if you want to start first, and then perhaps Sarah could say something about how engaging different levels of government, that would be fantastic.
Certainly, this is going to be really key. If you think about it, as we've looked at this issue as a Food Waste Reduction Alliance, I talked about the challenges that it represents, environmental, social, and economic, and that when you sit back and look at it, it seems like, gosh, you would never design a system like that if you had perfect control. But when you look a level deeper, you realize that this food system is made up of a lot of players. In fact, globally, over 7 billion of them, right? Because every citizen and consumer who eats at the end of the day has a role in this. And so I think the importance of working collaboratively across various boundaries is going to be critical, because oftentimes, most often, that waste happens between boundaries between organizations. And that's where the opportunity lies to solve the problems.
Yeah, this is Sarah, and I would just echo what Jerry and the Senator said. I think this is why USDA set this up, the challenge up in the way it did, with so much kind of giving, one, making sure that we're making a commitment, and two, giving our partners the freedom to commit in whatever way they can, because we don't want to define what you can and can't do to be a part of the solution. There are so many ways to play a role, and so it's really kind of welcoming everybody who's able to do something, and making sure that that's kind of, you're held accountable to it, but that everyone participates at their own level, because it is exactly what Jerry said. Everybody who eats is part of this kind of system.
Thank you. Operator, do we have any questions yet?
No, there are no questions in the phone queue at this time.
Okay. Until someone interrupts me, I'm going to go for a couple more minutes. We're nearly at 4 o'clock, but let's ask... We've saw something interesting about engaging transportation, and Jerry, you had that in one of your slides where transportation was one of the key barriers. Could you leave us with any ways that your company is addressing that, or lessons that you'd like to share at this time?
Certainly. So most of the time this is very much of a local effort, and obviously it's very, very specific in our case to the kinds of food residuals that are having to be managed and handled. And so the kinds of transportation options that are required really vary from place to place. But when I reflect on the Reduction Alliance's surveys, I think it really represents the fact that there isn't any kind of standardized system like there is for most of the rest of the solid waste operation. When we look specifically at this issue, the nature of the technical requirements to transport food residuals either safely or in a way that maintains the stream in a way that can be turned into composting or into animal feed. So I think that those are some of the challenges, and I'm heartened by what I see from, as the Senator referred to, many of the entrepreneurs who are taking up the challenge and really looking at this as a green business opportunity.
Thank you. That's really helpful. We did get a question come up in our chat box. Is there any discussion about the waste in serving sizes and the ingredients of food served, calories in food served? Can you comment on that question?
I can.
Please do.
This is Senator Lyons. The couple things. One, just as another type of legislation that we've passed recently is to have menus posted with caloric and nutrition information available to consumers at, just at restaurants. That's made a big difference. What's also made a big difference is that as restaurants have linked with local farms and begin to use local foods and are very aware of nutritional consequences of overuse of, over making food. So there's just been a lot of awareness about that, and people have options now that I don't think they had in the past for healthy food at restaurants and at institutional cafeterias and at schools, but also, as you said, as the questioner indicated, serving size.
Thank you, Senator. That's really helpful. I think we've finished our questions for the day, and I want to take this moment to thank again Jerry Lynch from General Mills, Sarah Heckhouse from USDA, and Senator Lyons from Vermont. For those that may have joined us late or would like to listen one more time, we will be reposting a replay of this seminar online early next week, and please visit www.ncsl.org/hunger. The final installment of our e-learning webinar series will take place next Friday, September 27th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we will focus on the subject of rebuilding after natural disaster events. You can register for that webinar on our website, ncsl.org. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks for all the collaboration getting this webinar off the ground. Have a great weekend.